The Insta360 Link 2C is the Insta360 Link 2, but without the gimbal. So very similar to the OBSBOT Meet 2, how it's the Tiny 2 Lite without the gimbal. This webcam can record at up to 4K 30 frames per second. It can also do 1080p 60 frames per second. It can record horizontal and vertical video. Now, if you want that 60 frames per second, and if you want that vertical video, the portrait mode, you're going to need the software Insta360 Link Controller. Also, it is quite a pain to record in vertical with this device, but I'll talk about that in a bit. Also, I've got to compare this directly to the OBSBOT Meet 2 because it has very similar optics to that webcam. This has a 1/2-inch sensor and has an aperture of f1.8. This has superb image quality. First, let me talk about it in daylight only. If you don't have any studio lighting, but you still plan on using this webcam in daylight, then this is an excellent choice. Right now, this is a fully automatic settings. This is only daylight. The sharpness looks excellent, but it doesn't look cartoony. Color accuracy, loving that. And it's really difficult to get the white balance on this wall, but it's able to lock that in. That being said, since this is intense daylight only sunlight, there is some overexposure over here on the table. And then you can see if I move over here, that's on my face. So there is an HDR mode available in this webcam. It's not super strong, but let me go ahead and show it right now. And this is with the HDR effect turned on. Now this is most noticeable on my skin where you can see over here, there's not that super intense bright light that's flashing off of it. And on the table, yeah, it's still quite overexposed. There's only so much that this webcam can do. Now with studio lighting and manual settings, of course, this webcam is going to be looking at its best. I'm loving the detail. The sharpness is even better than the OBSBOT Meet 2. So with that light in the background, excellent. This is perfect. If I look behind me right now, I look over here, perfect mirror image. But my skin tone, it's a little bit too yellowy. You can't really tell just in a vacuum just by looking at this image. But when I put it with another webcam, you'll really be able to see the difference. The grain, it's there. It's not crazy. It's not low. 1/2-inch sensor, there's not a whole lot it can do, but I wish there was a little bit less. Now the contrast is very strong with this device. I even turned it down, but my hair at the bottom, can't really see how light the tips of it are. Let's just go ahead and cut to the chase. Let me compare this to the OBSBOT Meet 2. OBSBOT Meet 2, 4K, 30 frames per second. HDR is off. Going to be off on both of these devices for this test. It's indoor lighting only, studio light, so it's very controlled. And at full screen, you can see that this has a very comparable level of grain. The color accuracy, I like it on my skin a little bit better, but the light back there, it's not quite to the same degree. And you can see that on my hair, you can see the tips, how much lighter they are. And now I've got these side by side. So you can start to see some of the differences here. You can see how much more intense the contrast is on the Insta360 Link 2C, where the hotspots that are on my face, like you can't really sweat with this device because it's going to make you shine really fast. And the OBSBOT Meet 2 doesn't really do that. The blue in the background is darker on the Meet 2. It shouldn't really be that dark, but I can't brighten up the image too much on the Meet 2 without it blowing out the highlights in my face. The black that's on my shirt, it's not getting completely crushed quite to the degree that it is in the Insta360 Link 2C. And the Insta360 Link 2C is overall sharper. So I've got to give the edge to the Meet 2, but both of these webcams look extremely good. So here we're at 1080p 60 frames per second so that you can get a little bit more fluidity. Obviously, you're going to lose some of that sharpness, but the grain doesn't get much worse, and there's not too much extra artifacting that goes in with more compression, because sometimes you get that when you have webcams that are doing 60 frames per second. The autofocus on this device is really quick. Something that I noticed is very interesting is as quick as it is, this is at 1080p 60 frames per second, I do find it to be even faster at 4K. So let me go ahead and swap over to 4K right now. And it could very easily be that it's able to tell, what it actually is a lot faster just because it has all those extra pixels. So if you're concerned about the autofocus of this webcam, it's excellent at 1080p and 4K, and in my experience, even better at 4K. Now, this is the Insta360 Link Controller software. I've already talked enough about how I think that this software is too intrusive. You can go ahead and take a look at that privacy policy if you want. But if you're okay with all that, this webcam actually is very capable. So it has this HDR effect here, which is actually pretty cool to use even if you're not in a setting that is daylight only with harsh lighting. It's going to take a little bit for this to auto adjust to my face. But if you notice, the contrast is not anywhere close to the degree that it was before. So it is an actually interesting effect if you want to go ahead and apply it even when you're indoors. But you're not going to be able to change the other settings of the ISO and the shutter speed. If you do that, change the white balance, all these other basic settings. And you can do this even when the webcam is active in OBS or another program. You just can't have this preview window open. And this is actually how you're going to change the resolution. You can change this to portrait mode. That's how you're going to do it right here. Now, the problem is, as you can see, it doesn't switch it as far as vertically. Like, I'm still in the wrong orientation. So what you would think is, oh, you just pick up the webcam and turn it, but there's no magnetism on the bottom of the webcam. I'll talk about the build in just a second. So you can't actually do that. So yeah, I don't really know the best way to utilize the portrait mode of this device. If you really want portrait mode, it might be better to just get the Link 2. Now I turn this HDR off and I have the shutter speed set to 1/60, ISO at 400. And you can see how much that HDR helps even indoors because yeah, now the dark areas just look way too dark and shadowy, and the brighter areas, they look a little bit extreme, even though the entire shot's actually not that bright. So if you want to go ahead and throw that HDR effect on, it's very useful. Then there's these gesture controls, they keep those off. Let me demonstrate the microphone. I'm gonna talk about the build really quickly. So this is the microphone of the Link 2C. You have different modes that you can select. This is music balance, which is just going to be the original audio. And I would say that's probably how you want to use it, but if you have a PC fan or something like that, it's not going to be that great. This is the voice suppression, which is going to be enhancing the highlights of your voice and filtering out other background noise. So we'll see how effective that is. I don't know why it's called voice suppression specifically instead of noise suppression, but that's what they titled it as. Then there is voice focus. And if you're closer to the webcam, which I can't really get that much closer without being too much in frame, this is another mode that you can pick. Now getting back to the build, this has a 60-inch cable. It's USB-C to C. It comes with an adapter type A in the box, so C to type A. This has a privacy shutter. Now it's not something that you put on the device. It's just you open it and close it by sliding the switch that's on the side. It has a magnetic monitor mount and the tripod threading is on the monitor mount. I don't really like the way that that works. And I also don't like the way that there's no magnetism on the sides of this device so that you can actually move it physically vertically. That would have been a lot better if you actually wanted to do portrait mode content. But this does attach magnetically to the base. But the device looks very small and sleek, doesn't take up a lot of space, very light. There's actually a capacitive button on the device itself that you can touch it twice and it will zoom in. It has some other controls too, but so as for my verdict, this webcam is great. It's almost as good as the OBSBOT Meet 2, but you know how I am on this channel. I got to keep it real and I got to give you an actual recommendation, which is if you're considering this device, then I would pretty much definitely go with the OBSBOT Meet 2 instead. Overall, I think it looks better because of the improved colors and much better contrast. Also, you can use it portrait mode because portrait mode content is becoming extremely popular now. But if you don't care about all that, the Insta360 Link 2C is still an excellent webcam.